welcome. I'm Richard Hulser. I'm the moderator for this track, which is track A, Content, Search, Management, and Engagement. And I'm speaking to you from West Hollywood, California. And our session now will be Amplifying AV and Digital Collections Across Campus. And our speakers are Ashley Todd Diaz, Assistant University Librarian for Special Collections and University Archives at Towson University, and Katie Gambone, who is the Senior Sales Manager at Quartex. So I'll turn it over to you. And before I leave, I should mention that please put comments and questions in the chats, whether you're on FeedLoop or Zoom, and I'll be monitoring them, and we'll have time at the end of their presentation to cover those questions. And then we'll have a networking area after the session's over with that you can go to if you have further questions after the session. So thanks, and Katie and Ashley, it's over to you.
Thank you. I will just take 1 second to share my screen, which I hope everybody's able to see. Are we all set here? Can you see my screen?
Yes. Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Well, hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be presenting at the Computers and Libraries 2022 conference. In today's presentation, we'll be talking about amplifying AV and digital collections across campus. My name, you've already met me, but again, Katie Gambone. I'm the Senior Product Sales Manager for the Quartex platform at Adam Matthew Digital. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Adam Matthew, we are a publisher of primary resource collections. We have been licensing archival content for over 30 years and have been publishing materials as digital collections online for about 20 years. We are proud to work with many of the world's leading libraries, archives, and research institutions to make their materials available online to the scholarly community. We have over 120 digital collections with new frontlist content being added each year, which dates back to the 15th century. Adam Matthew is also a technology provider. So we offer Quartex, the digital collections platform on which we build and publish our own databases. We offer this technology to repositories who want to use this for showcasing and making discoverable their own digitized collections as well. Adam Matthew has a global audience with over 1,100 customers in 44 countries, plus over 20 additional partners that are using Quartex for publishing their digital collections in 4 countries. Today, I'm really pleased that one of our Quartex partners, Towson University, is here joining me for our discussion. So during this session, I'll be speaking with Ashley Todd Diaz. Ashley is the Assistant University Librarian for Towson University's Special Collections and University Archives. So in just a few minutes, we'll be hearing from Ashley about the Towson University Special Collections and University Archives program. We'll discuss their collecting focus, their digital collections program, and also areas where they would like to grow that program and their audience. We will also be discussing Towson's participation in the Quartex AV pilot project and how this new technology is helping Ashley and her team build new relationships across campus. And then, of course, we'll leave some time at the end of our session to answer any questions that you might have. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's actually start out with hearing a little bit about Ashley. Ashley, would you mind just telling us about yourself and your background, and also how long you've been at Towson University?
Sure. So it's wonderful to be with all of you today, and to be back at Computers and Libraries. So I have been in the archival field for a little over 12 years at this point. And my pathway to where I am now, I started off in New York, at New York University's Special Collections, and moved into Kansas, where I worked at Emporia State Special Collections and Archives for a few years. And I've been at Towson University for just over 6 years.
Okay, great. Can you tell us a little bit about the Towson University Special Collection and Archives program? Are there key collecting areas that the university prioritizes?
Yes. So the archives at Towson has kind of had a, well, it was established in 1970, but we did not have our first officially professionally trained archivist until maybe about 10 years ago. So up until that point, you can imagine there were a lot of unprocessed materials, a lot of materials that focused in the history of the university and our institutional archives. But over the years, we have developed additional collecting areas. About 10 years ago, we merged with the Baltimore Hebrew University's Special Collections and University Archives. So we have a strong collecting area in Jewish studies. We've also developed a collecting area in terms of World War II. And because we have a history as being a normal school and teacher education focused institution, we also collect materials within the area of the history of education in Maryland. And our most recent collecting area has been performing arts, particularly within Maryland and within kind of the Baltimore region. But we are always, because our university is very focused on teaching and education, the special collections and university archives are viewed primarily as a research resource, as something that's very tied to our curriculum and to our students. And we see it as a growing resource.
Okay, fantastic. I know that digital collections are a really important part of your program and how you connect with researchers, but also the community more broadly. So in 2020, Adam Matthew was really pleased to be able to partner with you and your colleagues at Towson to help migrate your digital collections to Quartex. So can you just give us a quick overview of your digital collections program and also why you chose to make that move?
Yeah, so when the first professional archivist came on board, I believe their title focused on archival collections as well as digital collections. And our previous dean was very interested in getting more content available online and reaching a broader audience. And at the time, the piece of software that was chosen was Content DM. However, there were very few of our staff members who were trained to work within Content DM. And we had done some usability testing, and our students, we noticed, were having trouble kind of with the interface, with finding the materials they were interested in. And because we had a bottleneck in terms of adding additional collections, we weren't being able to add things and grow the digital collections to the extent that we were interested. So we had already been thinking about switching to a different platform in 2019. And our library had worked with Adam Matthew quite a bit and had a relationship with the company. So when we heard that there was this new platform and that it was very smooth and streamlined from the user's perspective. And it seemed very flexible so that we would be able to add content and kind of re-envision the content in various ways through exhibits and landing pages. And we've actually created a wiki within the platform as well. So it appealed to us in that it also was able to handle a lot of AV content, which was something that we were struggling with Content DM, that the interface wasn't able to load our video content in the platform. And so we had been putting a lot of content into YouTube, and then our users were having to click multiple links in order to get to the content they were looking for. So Quartex presented itself as something that could check a few boxes and address some of the issues that we were looking to resolve.
Okay, great. We've really loved partnering with you on your digital collections, and you mentioned AV collections specifically. And we were really pleased that last year you joined us for the AV pilot partnership. So just for the benefit of the audience, I thought I'd just take a minute to share a quick overview of what that is. So I'm sure that many of us here recognize that AV collections are growing in importance as a critical primary resource for today's researchers, but they also serve important purposes across campus. They also represent a number of unique challenges. In Quartex, AV functionality was really initially developed and implemented to support Adam Matthew Digital's unique video collections. So we have oral history, primary source film footage, audio recordings, video essays with academics, and many more types of assets that can be found in over 30 of Adam Matthew Digital databases. With more of our clients exploring Quartex to support a significant amount of AV assets similar to Adam Matthews collections, but really of varying quality, Adam Matthews engineers determined that while the needs of Adam Matthew overlap with the needs of our customers in most cases around AV content, Quartex customers have more varied needs and require additional functionality to really support those collections. So to best meet the needs of our entire client base, we launched the AV pilot partnership in 2020 to further enhance Quartex platform capabilities to support large and diverse AV collections. So 3 dedicated partners participate in the program, including Towson, which we're so grateful for you joining us today. The other 2 partners are the University of Florida and the Bay Area TV Archive at San Francisco State University. So to date, the AV pilot partners are really providing the Quartex team with critical feedback on the conceptualization and wireframes for a number of different features, including editing AV transcripts in platform, embedding AV files in Quartex from external sources, access controls, citations, and more. So over the next several months, Ashley and others will also be talking with us about other topics that we're exploring for development, such as clip creation, audio description, security, and more. So with that background in place, let's turn it back over to Ashley. So can you tell us again why you chose to participate in this AV pilot partnership specifically, and what you hope to accomplish by sort of adding AV capabilities to your digital collections program?
Sure. So one of the catalysts that really made us realize we needed to move to a platform that was able to address more AV content was right before the pandemic. Our university photographer, who had been on campus for decades and was very beloved, was getting ready to retire. And so he approached us and said that for the last 20 years or so, he had been saving the majority of his photographs on external hard drives. And he had roughly 10 or so of varying ages going back to the early 2000s. And altogether, they amassed roughly 60 terabytes of photographs. He hadn't plugged them in. He didn't know if they were all still working. He assumed they were still working, right? Because why wouldn't they? But he was aware that we needed to do something with this content in order to preserve it and make it accessible. And he had previously transferred physical materials, prints and CDs of digital content, as well as negatives and slides. So he was familiar with the archives. But that was a huge kind of kick that we needed to be thinking more along the lines of digital collections moving into the future. We also had, as I mentioned, a number of video collections that we were having to host externally from our digital collections platform. And we had some mystery audio recordings from the 1960s that we knew we needed to do something about in terms of getting them migrated to a more stable format. And we were intrigued. Some of the titles were things like desegregation, which is an incredibly important topic within our university's history. And we wanted to know what was on some of these untitled audio reels. So to be able to have a platform that we could share those materials in was incredibly important to us.
Okay, fantastic. So it sounds like this this technology really provided a catalyst also for you to create some new partnerships across campus. So tell us a little bit about the partners you have approached and why you approached those partners.
So as we realized that we were going to be able to join the AV pilot project, we started thinking about other campus partners that we knew were generating a fair amount of AV content, particularly those that would be of interest to students and researchers. Having had many alumni come to visit or classes come in to do research, we had a sense that commencement, right? That ability to go back and reminisce about an important event that everybody was able to share, right? Or that if somebody was coming to campus, they could show their children or their friends what their commencement video looked like. Or athletics, everybody who participated in a sport, there's a sense of camaraderie. And again, that ability to remember what had happened and share that. So we knew that there had to be, if we're talking about university photography having terabytes of content, thinking about all of the events that would have been recorded, all of the commencement ceremonies, all of the presidential events, et cetera, that we know are recorded on an annual basis. We wanted to talk more with marketing. We wanted to talk more with athletics. We've been crawling the website that athletics has put together for a number of years now, but it doesn't play well with our web crawler. So we know that we didn't want to lose that content either. We had also kind of through the grapevine heard from some of the art galleries on campus that they were looking for a solution to be able to maintain kind of a backwards looking catalog of all of the exhibits that they had put on. They used to collect all of that information on their website, but they had recently been told by the Office of Technology Services that due to space concerns, they were putting a limit on what they could put online. We also had been talking about how we could better represent the student work in the College of Fine Arts and Communications, because we do have an institutional repository, but it's focused more on textual materials. And so we were losing the work that was being done by our art students and our film students. So we wanted to reach out and perhaps build some of those connections and remind those departments that their scholarly work is also important to us. And of course, alumni. So we have 23,000 students at Towson. So you can imagine how many alumni we have. And in particular, we have been working with the Towson Black Alumni Alliance, who's been very interested in building a relationship and a partnership to tell the more, the varied history, of diversity and inclusion on our campus, and creating a collective memory and space for all of our alumni. So we knew that all of these partnerships were kind of in the works and that there was the potential for AV material behind them. And this pilot project allowed us to kind of take that next step.
That's great. It's and these may not be departments across campus that had been interacting with you or the library as frequently before. So how are these relationships that you're looking to build progressing?
So it's all varied, right? And of course, with the pandemic that kind of occurred in the middle of all of this, I think that created some relationships to grow stronger. For example, the alumni relationship with the Towson Black Alumni Alliance, they were really interested in working with us to develop an event that would coincide with homecoming this past fall, because everybody had missed being able to come together for a couple years. So thousands of people were planning to come to homecoming. It's an outdoor event. It's something that is it's built into a tradition. So it seemed like a safer event for as we're coming out of the pandemic. And so we were able to join their homecoming festivities and capture some oral histories, build some relationships with some of the people that attended. And in fact, one of the people that was willing to conduct an oral history with us, he was vlogging us while we were capturing his oral history. And he let us know that he used to have a radio program on campus. And he kept all of the shows, including ones where he'd interviewed people like Prince and Little Richard. So he's willing to work with us to transfer that content to the archives, and we would be able to showcase it in Quartex. Other examples, so in terms of athletics, we were able to leverage some existing relationships that we had, and kind of get to the right people to understand what type of AV material they have. And they've invited us to come in over the summer once their sports schedules calm down a little bit. But that was something we hadn't thought about, that if we're thinking about an academic calendar and, when the semester starts and when the semester ends, we weren't thinking about when basketball season starts and ends, or when baseball season starts and ends. We did find out that photography had decided to go their own way, and they ended up developing a relationship with the Office of Technology Services. And so they're paying for server space to house those 60 terabytes of content. However, nobody is doing any type of preservation work on the content, and it is not accessible to anybody. And that's also similar with the videography aspect of marketing, that they're currently paying to have all of their content housed, but it is not accessible. So again, I think there's some opportunity for us to continue to build those relationships and talk about the importance of access, and perhaps find a model where they're not paying thousands of dollars, to house content that is just kind of sitting there. Sure. In terms of the art galleries, we have a work plan, and we are going to be, again, looking at their schedules. We're going to be moving forward with migrating content over to the archives this summer.
That's great.
And so electronic media and film, they were very receptive to working with us, and they recommended an advanced film class. So it has a low enrollment, so the amount of material is manageable. And it's because they're advanced students, it's very high quality student work. It's their final course in film. So it was a nice example of being able to pull students into the process, and they've been helping us create metadata, and to essentially advertise and promote their own work that will then be in the digital collections.
That's fantastic. And I think too, it really does help to have proof points once you have a really strong relationship in place that hopefully can help to leverage some of those other relationships as well, and just give them examples that help increase the comfort level. So I guess you mentioned Workplan a little bit. So let's talk about that more. Once you identified your partners, what was your work plan for this project? Who from your team is involved in these efforts? And I guess what roles do your team members play?
So each partnership was different. I mean, as I mentioned, athletics was on a very different schedule than, say, the art department, the art galleries, or the electronic media and film department. So I think it started with me having a conversation, and in some cases, my dean would join me and we would talk about what we could bring to the table and what challenges they might be facing that we could help alleviate. And I think that the important piece, right, was developing that partnership, was developing that trust, and then figuring out where they were in the process. So were they ready to go? Were they going to be ready to go in a week or two to send content to us? Did they want to review things? Did they want to be involved with creating metadata? Were they concerned about any privacy issues? When we were talking with the College of Fine Arts and Communication, their dean's office was interested in providing additional content to us. However, there were considerations about streaming licenses. So during the pandemic, some of the performances that they put on were, you could buy a ticket and attend an event for a particular amount of time, similar to if it was live and in person. But say if somebody's grandmother wasn't able to attend, right? Or if they wanted to look at that content 2 years down the road or 5 years down the road, was there a way that we could build some type of security or some type of agreement into a particular collection to allow that content to be visible to a certain group? So that's something that, we hadn't thought about before, right? So pulling in some of those questions and working through challenges that they were sharing with us. But ultimately, we realized that there was a place for almost all of our team members to be involved. And so that created an opportunity for team building, right? So that everybody kind of had a stake in the process and they were able to own the overall product. But our metadata librarian is very involved with creating custom metadata.
Okay.
Our processing archivist has been really helpful in terms of digitizing content and running it through a digital preservation workflow. Our archives and research associates have been busy behind the scenes building out the web pages in Quartex and training our student assistants. And we've even had some of our library colleagues, our arts liaison and our copyright librarian in particular, who have joined in to help with some of the questions that have come up.
Okay. So you mentioned a couple of timelines, but do you have a specific timeline for bringing the new partners on board and just having that sort of proof point for them to be able to see their materials online?
We don't really. I feel like there's, as I mentioned, so there's different timelines. I think different people are interested in seeing different projects. So I think it will be helpful, once we have all of the film students' materials up, that will help us kind of pull other courses on board in terms of the academic side of things. And same thing, with more content focusing on alumni, then that will help us build additional partnerships with similar alumni groups. The administrative side of things, once they see other administrative offices, I think they will then be able to see themselves participating. But everything has been very customized to each partner.
That's great. Do you have specific benefits that you communicate to these potential partners for working with you, and what's the value add you can offer them?
I think the primary one that we've been trying to promote is ownership and contribution to this collective history and memory.
Yeah.
Quite often people struggle to see the value that they contribute or the piece that they contribute or how their voice matters, particularly with some of our administrative offices who are so used to focusing on the students, right? But coming from the archives perspective, it's everybody working together that creates the university. So building that ownership, really showing the give and take, building the partnership model. So what can we help them with as they're helping us build this collective history and memory? The idea that we are providing that broad access and standardization of the content, so they don't have to worry about figuring out, okay, are we going to digitize this content and put it up on our website? You know, that we can serve that immediate access piece. And we can also be thinking about long-term preservation and ensuring that that content is going to be there next year and 5 years down the road and 10 years down the road.
Okay, great. So what are some of your lessons learned from this exercise?
I think a big one is that everybody considers their information differently. So within the archives and the library, you know, we're really focused on access. We're really focused on, you know, helping people solve their information needs, right? And other departments might see the benefit of their information, the things that they're creating as more internal assets. So for example, marketing, they're loading their new photographs to a password protected application online. So any Towson University member, you know, can put in their credentials and access those photographs, but why can't everybody access them? Which raises the question, you know, is the archives able to go in and pull things and put them in the digital collections, or do we need specific permission? So remembering that even though we're focused on research, other people might not be focused on it in the same way. Also, again, as I mentioned, right, the fact that people might not see the value in their voice or perspective. So reminding people of how important everybody's voice is in understanding what happened at an institution. I think it also, the location of the archives within the institution can be a little challenging. So the fact that we're located in the library, we don't have the teeth to ensure that people will send us content or will cooperate with us. You know, if we were, say, in the president's office or in a more administrative role, I think we might be taken a little bit more seriously when we say we'd like to partner with people. But the benefit of being in the library is that we have that connection to students and to research and to the kind of the intellectual side of things, which I think we would miss if we were more kind of nested within the administrative side. And, you know, just understanding and learning that not everybody is going to trust you initially, that you have to build that trust with some partners and show them how you're going to be a fair and thoughtful steward of their information and their content, particularly if it's of a personal nature, like an oral history, and make sure that they, you know, everything is transparent and they will trust you.
That's great. And the point about like where you sit at the university, I think is a really interesting one. Do you have any recommendations that you can share with colleagues who may be doing similar work or thinking about it?
I think patience and thinking strategically about what connections you have, what do you know is going on in other departments, how can you leverage some of the relationships and the information that you have in order to really chart out where you want to go and to prioritize things. Also an awareness of existing needs that other units may have that can help you build that trust and build that sense of priority in terms of what you're trying to create with the digital collections. So, you know, if for example, somebody's, you know, a unit is really interested in connecting with alumni, but they're not sure how to get their content online or be able to connect it to different events, you know, the fact that the archives can be that central point might be really helpful. And an awareness of what else is going on in your institution, right? So thinking about timelines, thinking about other events or priorities that might be on people's plates so that you can kind of plan ahead and not be deterred if they're, you know, pushing you off for a few months. And so then perhaps that strategy comes back into play that, okay, well, if you're waiting on athletics, then maybe you can move forward with, you know, say a department that has handed all of their final material from the semester. And then you can use that as kind of your stepping stones to show other units what you've been able to accomplish.
That's great. Thank you, Ashley, so much. I've really enjoyed our conversation today, and I hope that you have as well. And for the audience, we hope that you found this information and I guess the learning experience of Towson helpful as well. So we can at this point open it up for any questions.
Yeah, so we do have a couple of questions, and
Okay.
folks, please add some more to the chat, and I'll be sure and ask them. So just to follow up, I'm going to do it a little bit backwards from the way they were posted, because Ashley, the question came up: what was the biggest challenge in getting the buy-in from the various partnerships Towson has built? You talked a little bit about some of them, but go ahead. Was there particular ones that were a big challenge, or others that you encountered?
I think trying to communicate what our vision was. I think, I mentioned that idea that different departments consider their information to have different values or to be for certain audiences. And I think some departments hold their content very close to them, and they were unsure of why we were asking for it. And I think the perception of archives are often old, dusty, things that, you kind of put your email into and you don't have to look at it anymore, right? You've cleared out your email inbox or your filing cabinet. And I think, so trying to shift that perception of what an archives is, that it's not just old stuff that nobody looks at anymore, but it's a central resource for the university to hold that collective memory, that we're not trying to take anybody's material or hide it away, but we're trying to enhance it and share it with a broader audience. I think there was a lot of sense of hidden agenda that we had to work through, and leveraging existing relationships helped a lot with that.
Yeah, and I think I work with archives or organizations who have historic materials. I'll put it that way, and a lot of times, what the senior execs who really don't necessarily understand libraries and archives like we do, and so they more and more are saying, well, why do we need libraries? On the other hand, interestingly, when you talk about an archive and the uniqueness of the material and its criticality and understanding the history of where things were and how to use that to promote where they are and where they want to go, they do understand some of that. It's just an interesting thing that I have seen, and I was wondering if you thought similarly or have found that to be true also.
I do. I think also the term archive, right? The verb to archive, I think has become so wrapped up in the technology world, as well as, being within the archival world, that our sense of what it means to archive something, many people that I ran into thought that they had already archived things because they were backed up, or they had put them on a shared drive, or they had put them on an external drive. And what we found was, so the 60 terabytes of university photographs, at least one of them had kicked the bucket before they were able to transfer anything. And so they lost about 2 years of university photographs in the early 2000s. So trying to convey what an archives does, that, we're about access, but long-term access. So we're not just going to store something, but we're going to be actively making sure that it is accessible, that preservation practices are in place. And there will always be that eye to it to help kind of explain why working with the archives is important. It's more than a hard drive.
Well, and plus, you can have 60,000 items digitized, but that doesn't mean you can access them in any way. The metadata, as we like to call it, the descriptors, the description, the access points, and the connection to whatever tools beyond your immediate internal tools are so critical, whether it's the Internet Archive ultimately or some other way through Quartex and a website and everything else. So, and then there's a question about Quartex actually. Does Quartex support the ability to have private collections that require authentication? For example, could faculty host videos for students that would not be widely available?
That's a great question. That is functionality that we are working on right now. So our development team is actually doing beta testing on an access control mechanism that will allow our clients to restrict access to materials of their choosing. So it could be an entire collection, it could be just a single asset. So that feature really will benefit, I think, our entire customer base. Everybody has different use cases for that. So it may be restricting for just a short period of time for a single individual. It may be restricting for anybody who comes to the site, maybe because it's very sensitive content, or it may be restricting for a class of students, for example, a collection of materials that you want sort of easily accessible for them, and again, potentially for a short period of time. So we're really working to make sure that all of those use cases are reflected in the way the functionality is developed, and we'll look forward to sharing that with all of our customers later this year.
And I'll just add, I think one of the benefits that we've really enjoyed working with Adam Matthew Digital is they're super responsive. So if you say, it would really be great if, I mean, the development team takes those comments seriously, particularly, I mean, that's been a benefit of the AV pilot project, that we've met a number of times as a group and talked about things like citation styles, or where it would be nice to have closed captioning. You know, do we want it on the video itself, or do we want it to the side? And all of those comments have been taken seriously and have run through the various versions that we've been able to see.
And I will also agree that with the clients I work with, several of them have said, we have sensitive materials. We want to digitize it. But then I say, yes, but, and we talk about copyright, we talk about sensitivity, we talk about other things. And they say, well, is there a way? And I said, yes, there's always a way. It depends on how much money, how much resource, how much, you know, it's just, there is a technical way to do it. And so, and in the minute or two we have left, Ashley, could you talk a little bit about the resources that are required as far as time and money? Because you've talked about the broad project, but people always are interested in, you know, well, how much time is this going to take, or how much money, you know, and the time is always infinite, right? Because to do it completely. But could you talk a little bit in some aspect of some of the projects you've been working on about that?
Yeah, I think so. Because we're a state institution, we have a history of being a teacher's college. So we have not necessarily ever had the resources to do a lot of kind of cutting edge work. But I think what's been really useful in working with so many partners is that we're building this collective network of people that see the value of preserving content relating to the university over time. So there has been a certain sense of cost sharing within the university, because everybody has an interest in making sure their content is represented, that their students can access things, that their alumni can come back and access things. I mean, that's still been challenging. And I'd say, I mean, Quartex has been very helpful. I mean, Adam Matthew has been very helpful in terms of working with us, you know, and helping find ways that we can get to the end result that we would like to, without feeling like we've put too many resources into a project. But it's still a huge challenge, right? If, you know, thinking we've only been working with a small fraction of all of the digital content that is out there at the university. So ultimately it needs to be kind of a paradigm shift of just the archives or just the library paying for these collections and the preservation long-term, versus it being really an institutional commitment.
Great. Well, we're just about out of time. This has been fascinating as I expected. Great. Thank you both. There's a networking area in the Feed Loop site page on the left-hand side, and under groups, track A, the speakers have agreed to pop over there for a bit of time before the start of the next hour. So those of you who may have some additional questions, please see that. And also note, Quartex has been an exhibitor here and supporter that way. And so thank you for that. And thank you very much. And as I mentioned, the presentation slides will be available by end of day today on the site. So look for that. So thanks, everybody, and have a good day.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.